Loading hot takes in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Welcome back into TwinTakes Fantasy Football. Today is Monday, and as of today on my Twitter, I have posted the final hot take for every NFL team. Now, because this is a new channel and overlapping content apparently is a really good thing to help get it off the ground, I'm going to recap every single hot take that I posted on my Twitter right here. If you want to, go check out my Twitter at TwinTakesFF. The tag is in the description. Pretty communicative on there. Tweet at me, tag me, I'll reply most likely, like your tweet, do all that fun stuff. But going to recap every single hot take I posted there right here in this video. And also, because it's out there published on Twitter, I'll be holding it accountable. We'll recap at the end of the year, see what I got right, what I got wrong. I'm not anticipating all of these to be right. These are hot takes. These aren't just like, top 24 running back season for Zeke Elliott, consistent starter. That's not hot. That's not getting anyone hot and bothered over here. So these are ones that, are going to make some people think. So got a lot of takes, got 32 to be exact. So let's get into it really quickly. First one, starting with the NFC East, Philadelphia Eagles. Dallas Goedert will be a top 5 tight end and outperforms ADP. Also, the Eagles will win the NFC East division. Unless I'm getting Mark Andrews in the third round, Dallas Goedert is the only other top 10 tight end I'm targeting at this moment. He's not a situational tight end, and what I mean by that is we look at someone like Mo Alley Cox, who is mostly a blocker in between the 20s and then becomes a red zone target. Dallas Goedert is used all over the field in every situation. He's proven himself to be a viable pass catcher with both Gardner Minshew and Jalen Hurts, and everything he's done in training camp and preseason so far just looks spectacular. Very high on him. I think he will actually outperform Dalton Schultz, who's currently going as the tight end 6, and some people have him ranked higher than Darren Waller and George Kittle. But going in the Cowboys, and kind of the inverse of that, Dak returns to a top 5 QB and outperforms ADP and will be a better value than Jalen Hurts. Jalen Hurts has certainly been one of the fantasy darlings this offseason and is currently, I believe, the quarterback 6 in ADP on most platforms. People are really in love with his rushing ability, but I think Dak right now is a tremendous value. Tom Brady's going above him. I've seen Russell Wilson rising ahead of him. Trey Lance is even going ahead of him in some drafts. But, last year he was really coming back from that ankle injury. Mike McCarthy's come out, says he's going to be back to, being a rushing QB. He's going to be have more confidence in that ankle, going to scramble a little bit more. I think he runs in a few more touchdowns, and I think he really elevates that Cowboys offense. Dak will be a fantastic quarterback option. He's one I'm targeting right now at ADP over Jalen Hurts, and that does hurt my soul because I'm not a Cowboys fan, despite the Dallas hat. Moving on, Washington Commanders, because I can't just put an emoji of a dumpster fire here. I'm just going to go with Brian Robinson outscores Antonio Gibson on the season. Straight up. No caveats, just straight up Brian Robinson, more fantasy points than Antonio Gibson. Rounding out, we'll have the Giants in that division, and Saquon returns to a top 8 running back. He's a steal right now at the end of the second round. I would consider him around the 1-2 turn. I really like what the Giants have done with their offensive line. Love the addition of Evan Neal, the progression of Andrew Thomas, and what Brian Dable is going to bring to that offense. I think Saquon's the focal point and will be a huge fantasy asset for whoever scoops him up. Moving on to the NFC North, I'm going to go with Aaron Jones finishes as a top 10 running back and outperforms his ADP. Similar to Saquon, he's another guy I'm targeting at the end of the second round. If I have an early first round pick, I'm pairing like a CMC or a Dalvin Cook with either a Saquon or an Aaron Jones. So he finishes the top 10 RB, outperforms ADP, and Aaron Rodgers throws less than 25 touchdowns. Between A.J. Dillon and Aaron Jones, I think the offense is going to shift to a predominantly run-heavy offense. Also, the fact they're in a really easy division, and as soon as they get up on opponents, they're going to rely on the run game a lot to finish out games. For the first time in, I believe, 4 years, Aaron Rodgers will throw less than 35 touchdowns. And I'm going even further than that and saying unless he throws less than 25 touchdowns. Vikings, Justin Jefferson will be the wide receiver 1 on the year. No caveat, the best wide receiver in the entire league. Also, I believe in the bounce back of Dalvin Cook. And while there's not really a hot take here associated with Dalvin Cook, I'm just saying anyone who's targeting Madison later on in the drafts is just going to be wasting a roster spot. There's rookies there that I like better that are going to have upside and potentially impact your team. And if you draft Madison, he will be a handcuff, just wasting a spot in your roster. Moving on to Lions, I've been pretty vocal about DeAndre Swift this entire offseason. He will be a top 3 running back on the year in half PPR scoring. And PPR scoring, we're not going to count standard scoring because he is a pass catching back. And Bears, Mooney outperforms ADP, not hard. That's not really a hot take. I do like Mooney. I think it's his production last year is a sign of things to come. I also think my hot take will be Khalil Herbert will outperform David Montgomery in ADP straight up. Moving on to the NFC South. For the Panthers, I'm just going to say that CMC should be the number 1 overall pick. I'm going to pick him over Jonathan Taylor. I think that a lot of the injuries, I'm not going to say that they're fluky, but they're not indicative of recurring injuries. I think as long as he can stay on field and stay healthy, he's a dominant running back. He's involved in the passing game. And I think with Matt Ryan behind the helm over there in Indianapolis, it's going to be more of a passing offense. JT will not get as many checkdowns from Carson Wentz. And JT will not be the overall pick, and CMC will rightfully reclaim his place as the number 1 fantasy running back. Also, believe Rule's head will be the first head to roll in the coaching chopping block this year. Falcons, I'm really high on Drake London. So Drake London will be the best rookie of the entire class and will finish the highest in his respective position ranks compared to other positions. This is including Breece Hall, Kenneth Walker, any quarterbacks. And what I say like this is I'm saying, Drake London will be a wide receiver 15 as compared to Breece Hall being a running back 20. I think in his respective position group, he finishes the highest, and I do think that he will be a top 24 wide receiver by the end of this year, even as a rookie. I think he's going to be dominant, just given the amount of opportunity in that offense. Buccaneers, Mike Evans will be a top 10 wide receiver and will outperform ADP. Very similar to Saquon and Aaron Jones being a steal at the end of the second round. Those are the 3 guys I'm targeting at the end of the second round. And I'm avoiding every other wide receiver. I have a ton of injury concerns with Godwin, and I'm fading Gage as hard as I possibly can. I discussed this in my sleepers. I need to go back to bed. My reasoning why I'm not touching Gage with even my last pick of the draft. To round out the NFC South will be the Saints. And I think, suspension or not, this is the year that Kamara regresses and falls out of the RB1 position. With news of no discipline, Calvin Kamara is rising to borderline first-round ADP. I would avoid at all costs as Winston won't support his pass-catching ability. This is personified by the fact that with Drew Brees, Kamara had at minimum 91 targets, and for 3 of those 4 years, he had over 100 targets. Last year, he had just over 60 targets, so that's a huge drop-off in his pass-catching work. And I think the Saints' offense will regress as a whole. I think it's going to be more predicated around Chris Olave, the return of Michael Thomas, and then just with Kamara's age, I think it's a multifaceted regression, so I don't think Kamara returns on ADP this year. I would much rather go with an Aaron Jones or Saquon Barkley. Moving on to our last NFC conference, NFC West, starting with the Seahawks. Kenneth Walker will be a better running back than Breece Hall, both in fantasy and in real life. I think he's a better pure runner. I think he's going to be utilized more, and I have more faith in the front office and coaching staff of the Seahawks rather than the Jets. So Kenneth Walker stocks up, Breece Hall stocks down. Actually, I purposely took Kenneth Walker over Breece Hall in my dynasty draft. So I know it's super hot, but I'm backing up what I'm saying here. Trust me, I'm not just throwing this information out and not acting on it. This is stuff I believe. Moving on to 49ers, Trey Lance will finish outside the QB1 range, and the 49ers will miss the playoffs despite a weakened NFC. I think coming from an FCS school is going to be a lot of growing pains being the starter this year. Really was babied behind Garoppolo last year, and not going to be an easy start. Trey Lance is going to be a good QB down the road. Going to be a rough start to his first year actually starting. They'll miss the playoffs. Cardinals, Marquise Brown supplants DeAndre Hopkins as a wide receiver 1 on this team, and I'm talking even after injury. So week 7 onward, no, we're not counting the first 6 weeks. Week 7 onwards, Marquise Brown will outscore DeAndre Hopkins in fantasy. So even with the return of Hopkins to the lineup, I think Marquise Brown will be a more valuable fantasy asset than DeAndre Hopkins. So that's why I'm taking Marquise Brown wherever I can in the 6th round, and I'm not drafting D-Hop anywhere. Even if he falls down to like the 9th round, there's still guys that I like more that are going to play the whole season. Last one is going to be the LA Rams. Cooper Kupp and Allen Robinson will both be top 20 fantasy wide receiver options. Yes, they're both going to be amazing this year. It's going to be the bounce back of Allen Robinson. He's going to be a value where he is right now, and they'll both be huge fantasy assets this year. Also, in the middle of the season, as OBJ shows signs of return from his ACL injury, he will re-sign with the Rams, and the Rams and Stafford will make him a fantasy-relevant option in the games that he does play, bar the first game back. Let's say he plays 3 games towards the end of the season. I'd be comfortable starting him with my flex. I think he'll be fantasy relevant. So that's all my hot takes for the NFC conference. Let's move on to the AFC, starting with the AFC East. Not hard to imagine given my fantasy sleepers that should go back to bed video, but I'm not high on Gabe Davis at all. And for the Bills, Gabe Davis will not outperform his ADP and will be a disappointment for fantasy this year. He's being drafted in the wide receiver 2 to 3 range. I think he's a wide receiver, wide receiver 3, but like a later wide receiver 3 or worse. So outside the top 30 wide receivers. I know that's sacrilege to say in the fantasy community this offseason, but that's what I stand by. Go check out my Twitter or go check out the video itself for the reasons why I think Gabe Davis will not live up to the expectations built around him. Moving on to the Patriots, not a single running back will be fantasy relevant given Belichick's loyalty to the RB room. This includes Harris, Stevenson, Pierre Strong. All of them will be worse than an RB2, and I'm avoiding them in any and all drafts. I think there's rookies with higher upside in Algier and Dameon Pierce. Moving on to the Dolphins, basically this boils down to I love Waddle. I don't like Tyreek in this offense, so Waddle will outperform Tyreek straight up. If I had to draft right now in the 3rd round and Tyreek fell to me, I'm taking Waddle over Tyreek straight up at the same ADP. Tyreek will finish outside the top 24 as far as wide receivers go. Finally, wrapping up the AFC East, we have the Jets. Breece Hall will not return value at his current ADP, and the only fantasy relevant piece in this offense is Elijah Moore. I'm really high on Elijah Moore. I'm loving what I'm seeing out of training camp and the preseason. I think he's a very dynamic wide receiver. I think he will be clearly a wide receiver too. And then Breece Hall, he's in that RB dead zone, but with Michael Carter there, with the Mekhi Becton injury, I just don't have faith in the running game for the Jets at all to get off the ground, so I'm avoiding Breece Hall there. And I would rather take Travis Etienne or J.K. Dobbins over Breece Hall where their current ADP sits. Moving on to the AFC North, Baltimore. Listen, Lamar Jackson is the truth, guys. He might be the best quarterback in the NFL. I think this is where he has that, insane fantasy year. 4,200 yards passing, 1,200 yards on the ground, and arguably the greatest fantasy season we've ever seen. So Lamar in the 4th, Lamar in the 5th. Easy pick for me. Very, very easy pick for me. Moving on to the Bengals. As you can probably tell with my earlier videos, I think there's going to be regression all over the place on the offense as a whole. I think it becomes a more conservative offensive system, more runs through the pass game a little bit more. They take more control of the games through possession rather than scoring. I think the Super Bowl has artificially elevated everyone's ADP. Higgins will be outside the wide receiver 24, so a severe drop in current ADP. Mixon will not be a top 12 running back, and that's with, just age and injury history, as well as, the added assets they have. And I think Burrow will not be a top 10 quarterback. Moving on to the Steelers, George Pickens will be the best fantasy wide receiver in Pittsburgh. So out of Deontay Johnson, Chase Claypool, and George Pickens scores the most fantasy points, period. No caveats there. Browns, this is another one where I wish I could just put a dumpster fire emoji, but I can't, so I actually have to pick something. And I'm just going to go with, all fantasy assets will not return on ADP. So Amari Cooper will not be a fantasy relevant wide receiver. He'll be wide receiver 3 or worse. Nick Chubb will not be a top 12 running back this year. I think he'll be kind of a lower tier RB2. And the only caveat to that is if Hunt is traded, then Hunt will return on ADP. But apart from that, I'm really not high on this. And if Hunt is traded, he will outscore Chubb straight up in fantasy points. I struggled with this one a lot. The whole situation around the Browns disgusts me. Deshaun Watson's kind of a icky person. I don't know. I'm sorry. This was a bad one. I couldn't come up with anything good. I just don't want to talk about the Browns. I don't. Moving on to the AFC South, Colts. Jelani Woods will score the 3rd most fantasy points on the Colts behind Jonathan Taylor and Michael Pittman. So this is obviously excluding Matt Ryan in the quarterback position and the artificial inflation because they touch the ball every snap. But I'm saying he'll score more than Nyheim Hines. He will score more than Alec Pierce. He'll score more than Paris Campbell. I like what I'm seeing out of him out of preseason. I'm giving him the preseason bump, and I think he's going to be a tremendous fantasy option, going to be a huge red zone threat for Matt Ryan. I'm getting images of Austin Hooper from a few years ago when Matt Ryan made him a fantasy star. So I think what Jelani Woods brings to the offense, I was super high on him. He was my tight end 1 actually before the draft over Greg Dulcich and Trey McBride. I just think he's an athletic specimen. Moving on, Houston, Davis Mills outperforms Aaron Rodgers for fantasy. This is all predicated on the fact that, I think Nico Collins is going to take that next step in his sophomore year. Brandon Cooks is obviously a tremendously slept on wide receiver. I think he will, and Davis Mills will throw like a solid 30 touchdowns and have a decent game. Obviously, this is in conjunction with my earlier take that Aaron Rodgers throws less than 25 touchdowns. So, yeah, I don't think it's for me to be out of the question that Davis Mills outperforms Aaron Rodgers. And also love Dameon Pierce. He's going to be a top 15 RB by the time it's all said and done. Draft him. 7th round is not too early. Draft Dameon Pierce. Titans, I kind of got a little vague with this one, so just, hang with me. Titans lose 8 of their first 11 games, and in Week 12 versus the Eagles, they make the switch to Malik Willis at quarterback. Malik wins 5 of the next 6 games and is a QB7 or better over that stretch. They missed the playoffs, but are now fully committed to the rebuild. They move off Derrick Henry after the season injury and breakdown. Oh, and Kyle Phillips outscores more than Treylon Burks. Enough said. Moving on to the Jaguars, Travis Etienne finishes as a top 10 running back and is a steal in the 4th round. Like I said in my running backs to win you a championships video, he's one of the 2 dead zone RBs that I'm really targeting. And I really love his pass catching ability and the connection with Trevor Lawrence there. AFC West, our last division here, Broncos. Russell Wilson will not be a QB1. He will fall out of that QB. He will be outside of the QB12 range. And the Broncos will miss the playoffs in that stacked AFC West division. Sorry, but the investment in Russell Wilson will not result in a championship this year, nor even a playoff berth. Chiefs, not a single Chiefs wide receiver records more than 600 yards despite Mahomes throwing over 4,000 yards. How can that possibly be? Well, I think Travis Kelce will be dominant, 1,100, 1,200 yards from Kelce. I really like what they have as far as their backup options. Blake Bell's super talented, Noah Gray as well. So, another 600 yards between those two. And then we can look at Mecole Hardman, Sky Moore, Juju Smith-Schuster, and Sky Moore. Mecole Hardman, Juju Smith-Schuster, Sky Moore, and MVS. All 4 of those guys can get like 500 to 600 yards. I don't think anyone's going to be super dominant. And then, that puts us right around like 3,500 yards. And then another 800 yards is going to go to the pass catching backs out of throwing to the running backs with, Clyde Edwards-Helaire. Not Ronald Jones because he can't catch passes, but, Isaiah Pacheco, Jerick McKinnon. I think there's just like a ton of offensive weapons. I think Andy Reid's going to really scheme a lot of players into that offense, and I don't think there's going to be, a single dominant breakout wide receiver for the Chiefs. So, super hot take there, and Chiefs will also miss the playoffs in this really stacked division. Raiders. Devontae Adams does not lose a step transferring team. He finishes as the wide receiver 2 right behind Justin Jefferson, and the Raiders make the playoffs because of some really clutch kicks by Daniel Carlson. Finally, the Chargers, the ones that inevitably I have picked to win this division currently. I'm going to say Austin Eckler finishes outside the RB1 range, ceding carries to Josh Kelly and Spiller. So I'm kind of fading him in the first round. I don't think he's a first round running back pick for me currently. Maybe the end of first round if he falls, but certainly not where he's taken, at the 4th, 5th spot right now. I think Herbert in the passing games takes another step, which is why I'm really high on Mike Williams. And there we go. 32 hot takes. If you want to go back and recap each one, ask me specific questions, again, go down here at TwinTakes FF. That's my Twitter. All the takes will be posted there. Reply there. I will certainly be looking at those and answering any questions. If you want to flame me for my takes, go ahead. It's your opinion. I've gotten some support actually on Twitter for some of my takes. I know a lot of people were very happy with my Drake London take as well. To each their own. I'll please a few, piss off another few, but regardless, these are my hot takes. I'm sure to be reminded about them at the end of the season. Take care.